All right, welcome, brothers. So, today we're going to be having a really serious sort of conversation, little podcasting, and it's about addiction. So, I'm going to be talking about my personal experiences, experiences of my close friends, and that sort of thing, and how can it affect your relationships and you on the long run and your focus, your ability to focus, and how I like struggled with that because I did struggle with that during school and all of those things. So, we'll get into that in a little bit. So. My previous video was about self-improvement. I suggest you guys go watch it, especially if you're dealing with addictions, because there's a lot of things that I cover in that video, like working out and having like a plan, a schedule, and setting like small realistic goals to work to your ultimate goal, which might be a little bit out of reach right now. And I think that's very important, and it can tie up with this video really nicely, which is why I put this video right after my old video, sorry, my last video. So, what are addictions? I mean, I guess it really depends what kind of addictions you're talking about, right? There could be like pornographic addictions. There could be drug addictions like weed, nicotine, or cocaine, hard drugs, and that sort of thing. There could also be alcohol abuse and addiction to a person too, like one-itis. That's definitely a thing that people don't really talk about. So it's usually just like a dependency on something that gives you dopamine or that makes you feel good. And then once you let go of that, you have like this sort of withdrawal effect and that fucks you up really badly. So, what type of addictions are there? So, I just mentioned that there's drug addictions and one-itis, nicotine, alcohol abuse, hardcore drugs. It could be an addiction to a family member. It could also be an addiction to like work, right? You could be addicted to work, and that could ruin your relationships and all your friendships, connections, and that sort of thing. Um, this is really hard to answer. So why do people get addicted? I mean, it's subjective. It's a really subjective question, right? It could be for a lot of things. Maybe you're in a really hard place, right? Maybe you have a bad family life, and in order to feel better and happy, you have to, I don't know, smoke weed, and then you develop an addiction to that, a connection because it's what's giving you dopamine. It could also be because of bad influences, like maybe you have a bad group of friends and they start smoking weed, and the problem with weed is it's a gateway drug, so it could lead to other things, and then it just gets progressively worse. It's kind of like a rabbit hole, if you know what I'm talking about. So you really got to be careful with how you answer why do people get addicted because, or at least I have to be careful how I answer that because it's a lot of different reasons for that sort of thing. So anyways, I digress. Let's go moving on to how do addictions affect people. So it can affect your mental health, really. It can affect your relationships with other people. It could affect your relationships with your family, your relationship with friends, maybe your relationship with your work, your goals. So it's important to just stay away from addictions, and then I'll talk about that later and how can it affect you and you in the long run and all of those sort of things, right? So it could also affect how you act as a person. If you're not on a type of drug that you're addicted to, maybe you're more irritable. Maybe you'll lash out more often, or maybe you'll be very twitchy or like constantly tapping on the desk. I don't know if you could hear that, but constantly tapping on the desk. Um, and I think it's important that I be honest as well, especially if I'm going to be talking about this. So, um, I don't have a super horrible relationship with addiction or something, or like an addiction that that really caused a lot of detrimental effect, but I do have some experiences with it. So I want to talk about my experience with one-itis, which is an addiction to a person. So I did have an ex that I was super addicted to, and I couldn't function on a daily basis without talking to them, which is, it's fine. I guess if you're in a relationship, it's different than it being a friend, but when things didn't go well, it just fucked me up really badly emotionally, and it really messed me up mentally, right? There was a lot of times where I considered not permanent solutions, but permanently lasting solutions, if you know what I'm talking about, because of that failure, that relationship, and the constant thought that it was my fault, or that I couldn't live without them, and they're gonna have a much better life without me, and they're gonna move on and find someone better, and then that jealousy was gonna make me, and it's just a lot of overthinking. So you really gotta be careful with that, especially if you're going through something like that, you have to understand that that's bullshit. None of that's true, right? This is the real world. It's reality. It's not a fucking TV show. It's not a movie where something happens, two people break up, and then one, well, I mean, it could happen, I guess, that one person gets like a much better life or something like that, but it's not that overthinking. When you're overthinking something, it's not going to happen 99.9% of the time, because there's so many different factors and possibilities that can affect it. I mean, fuck, the weather can affect a person's mood, right? That can affect someone's decision making and all of that. So, you gotta stop overthinking, honestly. My addiction with nicotine. So I remember in high school, well, I'm still in high school, but more specifically, my grade 10, grade 9 and 10 years, vaping was a really cool thing. And right now it's vaping, but a few years ago, 10, 11, 12, 15 years ago, smoking cigarettes was the big thing that makes you cool in high school. People were smoking in washrooms, smoking in parking lots, and all that thing, but they still correlate with nicotine. It's just it's such an easy, affordable, and acquirable drug, right? It's not illegal, right? I mean, well, weed's not illegal, but back then weed was illegal, so nicotine wasn't. So people would go to nicotine. And what if you guys aren't familiar with nicotine, which I really doubt it, and the effects of nicotine, it essentially makes you feel like super lightheaded and super like stress free. So that's why a lot of people that are having like anxiety problems or are going through stress at work, they'll start smoking cigarettes or vaping because it helps cope with the stress, right? So the way I got over it is a bunch of little eye openings and like eye opening situations and like slaps to the face that happened throughout my addiction and through my high school years and my sort of path. Um, Eventually I just kind of said like, you know what? After this situation, it's done. Like I stopped, and I stopped in November of 2020, and so far it is April of 2021. Today's April 8th, 2021. I haven't touched well, I have touched. I haven't vaped since. I haven't gotten any sort of dose of nicotine. Feel I feel much, much better. I can breathe normally. I remember I was also in sports, and it affect my lungs and like how I was able to breathe in my cardio and all that sort of thing. So essentially, some things that happened to me is I couldn't focus in class. Whenever I was in class, I would always be tapping my fingers, and then I would go like, "Hey, sir, can I go to the washroom?" I go to the washroom, take out my vape, and then I'd start vaping. Right? I was dependent on it. Every time during lunch, I would vape with my friends, and we'll get into that later, and you know, yeah, how the people you surround yourself with can really affect you in a good or bad way. Um, at one point I did vape a lot, like really like more than I've ever vaped before, and I essentially couldn't be in school any longer. I almost puked. I almost threw up, and my face was super pale, and I was had a horrible headache. I told my teacher, I was, I can't. Can I go home? Like, sir, I almost puked and I feel horrible. So I eventually got picked up by my brother, and then I went home. My mom was super worried, and she doesn't know, but it was because of nicotine. After that, I kind of started to realize, like, you know what, this is bad. This is really bad. I shouldn't have even gotten to that point, but it was really bad. So I stopped. I did get back into it, but eventually I did stop. And I stopped after this one time where I broke up with, my ex and the one night bullshit. And I was drinking and I was vaping, and it did help a little bit, admittedly, but it's not gonna help in the long run. And I know because I went through that. So, I went to sleep, I woke up, and I looked back on it and I reflected. I was like, you know what, that's bad. If I'm feeling the need to go to nicotine, I know for a fact that it hasn't worked for anybody before, and I'm no different. It's reality. I'm no different. So I just quit from then and there, and that's really difficult to do. It's really fucking hard to just quit one day to the other. So I know some people quit with different methods because not every method works with every person. I watched this video. I don't really remember what it's called, but one of the ways that he helped how this person, he was like an expert at helping people quit cigarettes. So the way he did it was he had people have a box of cigarettes, like addicts have a box of cigarettes in their pocket. So whenever they feel like they want to smoke, they can just grab a cigarette and do it. But they could also resist the urge, because the difference is you have it there. It's not like it's unreachable, but it's easier to just resist the urge if it's right there than it would be if you knew that it was unreachable, because then you kind of get this feeling of like because humans want what they can't have, right? If you can't have a cigarette and it's no near you and it's not near you at all, you're gonna have a huge craving for it. But if it's right in your pocket, you could resist it because you know it's there, right? You know you can have it if you wanted to, and then it comes down to your will than it is to your ability to get it, if you understand what I'm trying to say. So I got addicted because of a bad group of friends and also for my social status. So I don't, you guys know in high school, everything's really stupid. Nothing really makes sense. Social status doesn't make sense. You smoke weed, you're cool. You vape, you're cool. You flirt with a bunch of girls, you're cool, and all that bullshit. So I did get addicted because of that. I wanted to be cool. So I took up some addiction. I vaped a lot. I bought a bunch of vapes and a bunch of juices and all of that, and it led to a lot of bad things. Led to a decline in my grades, led into a decline in my health, right? I also played sports. I played rugby, and it didn't do me good at all. Um, okay, so to spot possible long-term addictions, if you find yourself being really irritable while you're on a substance that you know is addictive, then that's a red flag that you are starting to get really addicted on the long term, right? So if, I don't know, if your brother or sister asks you to do something and you get like super pissed off and like, why don't you do it yourself, and you respond like that, and you know that you've never done it before, and it catches them by shock, catches you by shock, because you never just like felt that way. That's when you really need to back off, and you really need to lose your dependency on it, because now it's actually starting to affect your behaviors, and perhaps it could lead to something even worse, like physical abuse, or if you're in a relationship, domestic abuse, because that does happen, and you really need to be careful about that, because if you have a family and that sort of thing, it could affect your children, especially if they see you doing that action, right? So how to improve on them. So I did talk about this in my previous video, but since it is such a serious topic, I'm not gonna say go watch it. I mean, go watch it, but um, I basically covered like working out and having like a schedule and working on your discipline. So working on your discipline can be like changing your sleep schedule a little bit, little by little, until you get what you want, or working out in the mornings, reading, or having like a schedule that you need to follow strictly. Um, your self will and discipline, that goes hand in hand with what I just talked about. You need to be able to just say and put your foot down. I'm gonna quit, or I'm gonna smoke one cigarette today instead of two, which isn't really that much of addiction. Or I'm gonna smoke half a pack today instead of a full pack of cigarettes. Or I'm gonna smoke one pod today instead of two, or half a pod today for vaping instead of two, or instead of one. And you work on just not smoking or not vaping at all. So I do have some articles here, and I'll post those in the description. One is NoFap. I don't know if you guys know what NoFap is, but porn addiction. So porn addiction is something that a lot of men struggle with. It's essentially, porn addiction. You feel an impulse to watch porn, or sometimes you'll just watch porn without actually being in the mood, and you just kind of it starts affecting your version of reality, right? You'll maybe start looking at women as sex objects and start looking at just women sexually, right? Maybe you'll see a woman walking by, and instead of, I don't know, just not looking at them or not caring at all, you'll see like, oh, I want to fuck the shit out of her. You know what I'm saying? So you got to be really careful, and you got to take that seriously, because I feel like that can really evolve into you doing something impulsive, if you know what I'm saying. And that's really bad. The consequences for that are horrible. Life in prison, and your social status plummets down to the ground. So take porn addiction seriously. It's definitely something that's coming into light in recent years. And this I posted. I'm gonna have a Reddit link on NoFap, because a lot of people post on this, like things to get better and what they did to get better, and then reality of relapsing. Relapsing is going back to it after trying to quit. And they really try to help you a lot with that. I took a quick look at it. just before making this video. That's why I posted it here. So um, surround yourself with the right people. This is important. This goes back to why I got into vaping. So my personal experience with my friends was I had a bad group of friends. Every lunch we would go to a community center, and not all of them did this. Not all of them were bad, but there were a few bad apples in them. And we would start vaping, or they would start rolling blunts, and that affects you. Obviously, you don't want to look like a loser in front of your friends, so you'll go and, yeah, I can vape this, or yeah, I'll smoke, and I'll get high with you guys, and that sort of thing, and that can affect you, especially, and it's not worth it. Honestly, high school friendships don't last. I think I've had like two friends from high school message me ever since the whole COVID quarantine started and school was shut down. So it's not worth getting into those addictions and messing up your health and mental health, especially just for like a few friends that don't actually care about you, right? So essentially, so what I did was I just changed the people that I was around. I have a friend. I've talked about them before. My two close friends, they both quit vaping, and that moved me. That inspired me, I guess, and it helped me quit as well. They would also help me whenever I was vaping. They would help me quit. They would say like, "Bro, stop." So I'm not gonna take all the credit for quitting. Obviously, I did have some help. So this goes hand in hand with quitting altogether with your friends. If you have a group of friends that vape and you guys all quit, you guys have like a little alcohol anonymous little group there. You guys can help each other out. The pros and cons. The cons, obviously, health, mental health, long lasting effects on your relationship. If you have a family and your children, it could affect how your children grow up and how they perceive parents or what they're supposed to be. And then when they have children, instead of being good parents, they'll be like you. And I'm not saying you're a bad parent, but if you're addicted to something, you're setting a horrible example. Worse, if you let it affect your relationship with your wife or husband when you start, hitting. So you got to be really careful, and who you accept your example to. You could also be a high school student and you're babysitting. You don't want to give that bad example to the person you're babysitting, right? That has like a really big and possible domino effect or butterfly effect, where it keeps knocking over. What a domino effect. You dominoes, right? You hit one and then it hits the other, hits the other, hits the other, hits the other, and it creates this whole path of bad choices that isn't necessary and doesn't need to happen. The pros are quitting is you lose that dependency. You get more self control, self aware. You have a more real version of reality. Um, you no longer have the health effects. You could breathe properly. In my case, you have a healthy relationship. You can build healthy relationships that aren't based on drugs, and we'll get into that later. Fake relationships based on drugs, or a false relationship or false liking to a person because of drugs, and you build a relationship on drugs, and like I don't really know how to explain that, but I'll get into that in a second, and then I'll tell you guys about an experience with one of my friends, and how one of their close friends completely like stopped talking to them to have a friendship with another person, and it was because they both smoked weed. So quitting a dependency is better. I just mentioned that you have self-control and better health issues and that. Long-term effect on addiction. So I mean, think about that for a second. Broken families, it's really common now, and it's super sad to see that, where you'll have kids that think it's normal for their parents to be drinking and fighting over stupid things, and it's because they're letting addictions and dependencies affect them. So it's a really serious topic, and if you know someone that's in that, you have to definitely help them, because they're your friends, right? Or they're people. They don't deserve to go through those horrible things. And although at face value they look okay, trust me, inside they're not, right? I had a friend that went through a tough time like that, and on the outside they looked okay, but on the inside they weren't. And it really changed them a lot. So you got to really be careful with that. I already covered that. Reality versus reality under the influence. Okay. Okay. So be real. if you're under the influence, your vision of reality isn't real. When you're smoking with a group of friends and you guys got together and you guys became friends because of drugs, that's not reality. They're not your real friends. Trust me. You drop weed, they'll drop you. Okay. So you got to really step a foot down and say, like, you know what, guys, like, bye and get the fuck out of there. Like, run the opposite way. Don't red flags aren't only for fucking relationships, like intimate relationships. Red flags are for just people in general. If you meet someone and they're potheads that are only friends with potheads, it's probably because they're only friends with them because they smoke weed, not because they actually like them. So run the other fucking way. All right. The consequences, like law and death. Okay. So this is pretty self-explanatory. If it's illegal, don't do it. If you get caught, you're screwed. And if you're young, you're even worse screwed. You completely fuck up your future and your possibilities and your doors. You lock your doors, right? I mean, is it really worth it? Is weed really worth like your career, or is like smoking with a bunch of friends and partying right now worth your self-image in the future? I mean, I know I have a professor, I know this is slightly worse, but I had two professors that got charged with something and completely messed up their whole teaching career. They had a long teaching career, 15, 20, 30 years, and it's all gone because of a bad mistake. So is it really worth it? No, it's not, especially if you end up dying, or worse, if you kill somebody else or you kill a family. If you're drunk driving and you fuck up, you crash into somebody and you kill their whole family, not only does it affect them horribly, but it affects you and it affects your mental health and it affects how you look at yourself. So you got to really weigh out the consequences and see if it, and come up with your own conclusion if it's worth it. And no, it's not. I'll just tell you right now, it's not. You build fake relationships build around addictions. You're only friends with fake people because you guys smoke weed, not because you actually have a friendship. And you guys will start using each other for money, or for sometimes for sex, or sometimes just for free weed. So drop them. If you find yourself in that situation, drop them. They're not friends. They are not friends. Okay? Being sober, having a clear mind, and being able to have a full sense of control. So, okay, I don't know if I want to talk about that. A lot of times when I was addicted to nicotine, I didn't have self-control. I did a lot of stupid things. I was really irritable. I would lash out at my family, at my brother. I would lash out at my friends. I would not have a clear mind. I would say, like, bro, fuck school. I want to go vape with my friends. I don't have a clear mind. I didn't have a clear decision making, or a healthy decision making sort of sequence, like a system, if you know what I'm trying to say. And it just wasn't good. And it's not good for you, it's not good for me, and you're no different. Your friend is no different. It's reality, not a fairy tale. And reality often has horrible consequences and death. I already talked about this, about how I couldn't focus in school. Okay. So, um, I had this constant crave of nicotine, especially during my classes. My professors would be talking and I would just be craving. I would just be looking at the clock, waiting until lunch so I can go vape with my friends. Or I would go like, sir, can I go to the washroom? I already said this. Can I go to the washroom? Then I'd go and vape. And then eventually I had to I had to go. I had to leave school because I got so bad. It brought down my marks significantly. I asked to go to the washroom and all of that. So now, how to spot if you're about to get into um an addiction, or like a rabbit hole of addictions, and the problems with weed and nicotine. Okay, so there's a game built around nicotine and vaping, and it's called baseball. Essentially, uh you set like a time, like 5 seconds, 10 seconds, and then essentially you inhale a vape for 10 seconds, and then you pass it on to the next person, and then you keep going for 10 seconds until one loses or one can't anymore. So that is horrible. That is horrible. Okay. So, especially for men, and I'll talk about why. So, men, we have this sort of a primal or like subconscious wanting, like all want to be the best guy. There's always competition. So not only are you getting yourself into an addiction, but you're also subconsciously trying to be the more alpha person there, the more stronger man, the better man. And trust me, vaping doesn't make you a better man, but when you have your whole friend group based around nicotine, being the better man is who can vape the most. It's what makes you cool, what makes you the guy, the man. So you keep going, you keep going, you go past your limits, you get sick, you end up winning, and then you go throw up, and then you feel like shit. You have a headache for the rest of the day, and you're investing into a bad addiction, into a bad future. So if your friend offers you to play baseball, just say no and then just leave that friend group. If you find yourself wanting to play baseball, it isn't because you actually want to play baseball, but it's because you want nicotine. And I found myself asking my friends to play baseball, but it was only because I wanted an excuse to vape a lot and to get that huge dopamine and stress relief. It leads to other things like weed and other hardcore games. Gateway drugs, nicotine leads you to weed, weed leads you to, I don't know, fucking cocaine, and it just keeps going on like that until you end up overdosing and dying. So hopefully my previous experiences and all of this, I'll post a link to my document in the description. Hopefully it helped you out figure out what you're going through, and if it leads you to it, if it's going to lead you to a long-term addiction. Hopefully the red flags that I talked about, like being impatient or being super irritable, and your relationships, and hopefully it helps you cut out bad friends that are only there for you for weed or free drugs or whatever. um I think I think it's important. Oh, I just got an Amber Alert. I think it's important for you to be able to catch these red flags and be able to make yourself a better person. So yeah, thank you guys for watching this video. I wish you guys the best of luck. Always keep improving yourself. Watch my other videos about self-improvement, heartbreak, and all of that. Obviously, videos will keep coming out. I love you guys to the fullest, and I only wish you guys the best of luck. Bye-bye.